Folks, I recently traveled to the UK for my first ever Scrabble tournament across the pond, the Easter Matchplay Major, and I had an absolutely fantastic time. I'll be posting a recap of my own tournament experience next week, but today we're going to take a deeper dive into the most entertaining game from the tournament's live stream. I was on the stream 4 separate times, but none of those compare to the amazing round 8 matchup between veteran experts Calum Edwards and Jason Carney. Calum has the first move and gets off to a fast start with overgot for 80, and Jason quickly responds with another overword in overread for 74. The A lands in just the right spot for Calum to overlap with J for 47, and Jason draws the S but also 2 U's. His top scoring plays here are phase or foys for 47, but each of these plays leaves both of his U's for next turn. However, the most logical play that uses a U is UFO for 20, which is a 27-point sacrifice, so Jason understandably plays foys here to grab those extra points. Calum answers with the optimal play of Yao for 35 from a clunky rack, and you can see why the UU combination is dreaded so much by tournament players, as Jason draws the first blank and very nicely balanced tiles, except for the U's, and because of that, he has no playable bingos here. Utu for 14 is a reasonable choice, but Jason elects to sacrifice points here to keep an even better and more balanced lead with just Utu for 5 through the T already on the board. Next, Calum clearly sees the obscure 6-letter Vatmen on his rack, which plays here for 36, but perhaps unsure of the word, he plays Mem for 23, which also offers better rack balance than Vatmen. After Jason plays his only available double-double bingo of rare bits for 86, a very nice find, Calum benefits from his choice when he draws Vantage for 75, hooking 2-2. In fact, Calum immediately draws Plotter out of the bag, which will fit hooking Vantaged, and Jason has a viable looking option of Baw for 31, which will only make Plotter hit even harder with the Bawd hook, but Jason wisely tacks on his L to play Ball for 33, leaving Calum without a bingo. Undeterred, he makes a very nice overlap of Prol for 41, which is well worth it despite the duplicated D's left over. Jason draws an S and the ING combination, and he could play Tasting for 70 points here, but this opens up huge potential overlapping plays if Calum has the X. He wisely plays Stating for 2 more points as well as slightly better defense, although this play still does open up triples back to Calum, who draws a third D as his only consonant. He makes another very strong overlapping play of Dido for 32, balancing his rack and denying Jason access to both of the newly opened triple word scores. Jason was going to have ZD through the T of Stating, so it's a timely block. However, Freeze for 46 is an excellent consolation prize, and Jason spots it to jump back into the lead. Calum draws the X along with the synergistic CH and ED combinations, and he has a lot of viable options here. The most aggressive option and the one favored by the computer engine is X'd for 50, which is not only the highest scoring play, but also sets up Calum's H in reserve with very good follow-up plays, scoring an additional 48 points. Calum instead opts for X'd for 36, which opens up what could be a valuable bingo lane on row 14, with him still a step behind Jason in tempo. Jason draws the second blank, but also 1 vowel and the dreaded Q. With 2 U's unseen, keeping the Q could actually turn into a positive here, with 45-point plays often available to the P of Prol, and Jason wisely plays Hex for 37 to retake the lead and make the row 14 bingo lane a little bit harder to hit. Calum answers with the engine's favorite choice of Chip for 33, putting the valuable C out in space, which will be difficult for Jason to block. After Hex, Jason draws 2 more consonants, and while he can play Chi for 21, this would leave him vulnerable to drawing another consonant and being severely constrained on his next turn as well, so he correctly opts to exchange tiles instead and gun for a quicker bingo. Now it's Calum who seized the tempo, and he plays Koa for 31, continuing to hold on to the valuable final S of this game. Jason draws a bit better after his exchange, but here he temporarily fails to consider making the blank a G, which would give him the huge bingos of circling for 86 or even churling for 78 through the open letters at the top of the board. Apart from these bingos, there aren't any standout options, and Jason plays in for 12 to undouble his eyes. This shorter play puts Calum in a bind as he now has to worry about bingos in two separate areas of the board. A play like Coupe cuts down on the open floaters on the top of the board, but doesn't score very well and leaves him more vulnerable to bingos at the bottom. So he decides to play Pose for 32, scoring well, blocking the bottom of the board, and leaving the U on his rack with the Q still lurking in the unseen tiles. Amazingly, after playing IN on his previous turn, Jason draws IN from the bag, and with a second chance at the same rack, this time he spots churling for 78. While circling would have scored 8 additional points, Calum does challenge the more obscure churling, giving Jason 5 extra points to close that gap. However, the final 4 tiles in the bag are E, L, N, Q. And after churling, there's only one spot where the Q will play, giving Calum a huge opportunity. Realizing this, he plays Tuan for 21 to block that spot and score well to the triple, and while Jason is still in the lead, he's now going to be stuck with an unplayable Q. He makes his best move of Zen for 14, preventing Calum from using that spot himself with his E and forcing him to take his second best spot for the E with Yao for 12. With just IU left on Calum's rack, Jason elects to block his lone outplay of PU with Pay for 4. Technically, Calum should now play If for 5 points to block Jason's potential Lad for 12, as that is by far the best spot left for the L. However, Calum takes an additional point for Uni instead, and after Jason plays Lad, Calum can go out with Goo for 4, leading to a 518 to 515 victory for Calum Edwards. In fact, the players agreed on an even closer official score of 516 to 515, a 1-point margin. Had Jason played circling instead of churling the second time around, it still would have led to a complicated but theoretically winning endgame for Calum, again involving blocking the lone Q spot. Had Jason played circling the first time he had it, he would have been in very good shape. Still, in this game, Jason had 4 bingos and a final score over 500 points. Not a game you expect to ever come out on the losing end. Well done to both players on a really entertaining battle. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And once again, I'll be aiming to have my own tournament recap from the 2026 Easter Matchplay ready for next week. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.